there will be a lot of engineers that are able to translate some of these harder to understand requirements or challenges that you maybe that are in a problem space that you're less familiar with into more actionable steps, like engineering steps, right? I think that that's going to be another area on both on the government side, developing requirements, and also on the industry side, kind of.
There's a lot of change going on in the federal government right now, and it can be quite hard to keep up. So today, we're bringing you into the world of cybersecurity with Ryan Malani. Ryan is currently the COO of Inflow, an emerging non-traditional government contractor supporting the Department of Defense and Intelligence community. And one of the first questions I do ask him is, break that down for people who might not be as familiar with what that means as he is. We cover how AI is transforming cybersecurity, the risks and opportunities of that transformation, and how the AI and overall tech ecosystem is evolving in DC. Plus, Ryan gives some tips to our future cybersecurity experts who are currently in school about how to stand out from the crowd. Let's get going. Welcome back to DC Decoded, a Gen AI podcast where we break down what happens when artificial intelligence meets the nation's capital. I'm your host, Sam Lee, part of the Gen AI DC chapter. Today we have with us Ryan Malani. Ryan is a software engineer and data scientist. He acquired a bachelor's in computer science and data science from Marymount University, where he supported multiple research efforts and was one of 7 undergraduate students to be part of the first ever Emerging Talent program at Netflix, before joining Inflow Federal. At his current company, which is a government contractor, Ryan has solved internal data and program execution problems with software and external technology challenges for government customers. He now serves as the company's chief operating officer. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Sam. Excited to be here.
Of course, let's get started. So can you first just share a bit about your background and your path to Inflow and now being COO? How did you get to where you are now?
Sure. No, it's a good question. I would say my passion for computer science started out very early. My brother went to Thomas Jefferson High School in Alexandria. He was always bringing home these little Arduino projects and fun things to tinker with. I was in middle school at the time, and I just thought it was really cool to write code and mess around with these small computers and solve these different problems. It wasn't super apparent to me at the time that I really loved computer science and coding and solving these problems at the time. But as I kind of progressed through high school, went to college, I started out as an econ major, realized that I was really missing out on my passion of computer science since I was still doing all these side projects that involved coding. And so I decided to pursue it further. You know, as you mentioned in your introduction to me, I was lucky enough to be part of the Netflix Emerging Talent program. You know, I had met the CEO of Inflow Federal through one of my previous roles in college and just stayed in touch with him, continued to reach out to him. And it came time that he needed someone to come in and help solve some of the internal problems that they were having from a data perspective. And I had some interesting solutions there and happy to chat about those in greater depth. But after joining, there were a lot of cool problems to solve from a software perspective, a data perspective. Was able to solve some of those, realized that I really missed having some of that sales flavor and being able to solve problems for other people as well. I noticed that there were a lot of challenges in the government space that I wanted to solve. So was fortunate enough to have the opportunity to kind of shift roles a little bit there. And here we are today. I've been able to continue growing with the company. They've awarded me a lot of opportunities to keep growing and do bigger things.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And I know that in the information you had sent over to me, you stated that Inflow Federal is an emerging non-traditional government contractor supporting the Department of Defense and Intelligence community. So break that down for people who might not understand exactly what that means. So what does that mean?
Yeah, no, I love it. So this is a big passion of mine. It's a big passion of all of ours at Inflow, right? I think the traditional government contracting approach in the past was let's throw as many tools, as many licenses, as many people at a problem as we can. And I think that we're seeing a big shift in the culture aspect of government contracting today, where it's, hey, let's solve for mission outcomes. Let's partner with customers. Let's get deeply embedded in their problems. Let's bring commercial minds and folks that have solve very similar problems at scale in commercial companies to come solve these very hard, challenging problems in the defense space. While the incentives are a little bit different in both of those two spaces, the underlying problems that we face at scale are very similar. And so when we say, emerging non-traditional government contractor, it's, hey, let's bring in some commercial minds and let's take a slightly different cultural approach to solving problems in the government space, right? Let's sit right next to them. Let's embed with their challenges, and let's take a very product focused approach that you traditionally see in more of a commercial company to solve some of these problems.
And this non-traditional approach you're talking about, has this been a more recent trend, or has it been years, maybe decades in the making? Like, when has this trend been taking off and growing?
Yeah, I would say that there has been a lot of traction in the space within the last few years, but it's definitely not a movement that is super new either, right? There are lots of companies that kind of entered the space 20 or so years ago. Palantir being one of them, right? They entered the space over 20 years ago, and their big thing was, let's bring the Silicon Valley tech culture to the Pentagon, right? And so it was a movement that maybe started a while back, and it's started to get a lot more traction. There's a lot more receptiveness from the government to kind of adopt the Silicon Valley mindset, if you will, and culture, tech culture. And so, we have been able to kind of take that a little bit of a step forward in the sense of they started out with pure Silicon Valley talent, right? Where they have, just the best engineers coming in to solve these problems. And they faced a lot of challenges on the adoption side, being that, it was hard to fully embed into some of these challenges, right? We take a very different approach in the sense of we have something called the VOP, the Veteran Outreach Program, where we're bringing in folks that have lived in these environments and have lived these problems real time and are able to come in and then, partner with us on the engineering side, partner with the customer on the challenge side and the mission outcome side, and really be able to kind of bridge those gaps. And there's a lot of very talented folks that have done very similar things while they're active duty that can then come to the industry side and continue to support the Pentagon and the mission, and they love doing so, and we love having them.
Right. That's awesome to hear. And when you look at what Inflow does, like from the website or what we've talked about, we know that Inflow has deep expertise in things like cybersecurity, digital modernization. From your perspective, what are you seeing to be like the biggest technological challenges in these areas for federal agencies? You've mentioned adoption as potentially one, but could you talk more about what are the current challenges happening that Inflow is addressing?
Yeah, absolutely. And I may be a little bit biased here, right? I come from a software and a data science background. That's my passion. That's what I love doing.
Right.
And so, of course, I personally think that that's the biggest challenge, right? I don't think that I'm alone in saying that, though. There's a lot of folks that are recognizing, even on the government side. And you can see with the Chief Data and Artificial Intelligence Office popping up, Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, some of the bigger programs like the Advana program have exorbitant amounts of data in the government space. And you can do so much collection, you can build so much infrastructure to house all this data. But then what do you do with it, right? How do you transform these petabytes of data, countless data centers all over the globe that house all this data? It's no good unless you're creating something that an operator or an analyst in the field is able to do something with, right? So I think that that's the biggest technological hurdle. I think that AI is going to, obviously I'm very bullish on AI in the government space, right? To be able to solve some of these challenges. I think that from a future hurdle perspective, because a lot of the data science technology and the software engineering methodologies and frameworks and everything, they exist, right? They're being used at scale on the commercial side. I think from a government's perspective, how do we jump over the hurdle of compliance and automated security checks, code vulnerability scanning, doing a continuous ATO? How do we solve these problems to rapidly iterate and develop software and data science products that serve a government customer that we're able to kind of continue to partner with and adopt that same rapid pace of development that you see on the commercial side in the government space, but just in a very compliance constrained environment.
Right. And I'm sure that comes up a lot. And can you just define ATO for people who might not be aware of that term?
Yeah, of course. So ATO stands for Authority to Operate. It's essentially the green check mark, good to go for a piece of software or a system to be available on a DoD network.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Yeah, let's talk about AI, artificial intelligence. First thing is for you, like how do you define artificial intelligence? Because I'm realizing that obviously there are like objective definitions, but everybody has their own little take on it. So yeah, how do you view AI? What does that mean to you?
Yeah, I would say that AI to me today is more on the non-deterministic side, right? I think that there's a lot that has been developed that I still view as just data science. And I don't mean to say just data science, but, regression modeling, some of the traditional methods of analyzing data that are very deterministic, I see as being more on the traditional data science side, the statistics side. And then a lot of the stuff that you're seeing that has emerged, right, on the generative models, like the adversarial networks that you're seeing a lot of in the government space. You're seeing a lot of large language models coming out from all the different providers, obviously. Everything that's kind of generating content that still has some determinism on the algorithm side, but you can put an input in and get a different output out nearly every single time. That's what I view as AI today. And obviously, I think that my viewpoint on that might shift and change as things evolve, but that's where I'm at today.
Right. No, that makes sense. And how is AI impacting your industry? How is AI influencing what Inflow does, how it operates? Just give us some details on how AI is impacting your work, if at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's impacting it insurmountably. I would say that for us as a company, right, I think we're able to adopt a more traditional tech company mindset in the sense of, hey, we can operate lean. We can utilize these tools to augment some of the stuff that humans or some of the lower fidelity tasks that humans are taking on today, and allow and enable those humans that are within our company to do much higher fidelity tasks, right? I think the human brain is too precious to not be spent doing and solving hard problems, right? And talking to people and understanding needs and solving these hard technological problems, or finding the right tech talent to solve these problems, right? I think that the human brain is a lot better at solving some of those problems than it is sifting through spreadsheets and some of the lower fidelity tasks that we're spending human time on today. So I'd say from a company perspective, that's where we're investing a lot of time in building out our AI infrastructure and tooling. And then on the government side, obviously there's a lot of compliance hurdles to get past today. So I'd say that we're still early in the game of being able to implement some of these AI technologies in the government space. But we're seeing a lot of headway and a lot of progress being made on a daily basis. That's really exciting to watch, right? Especially with OpenAI partnering with Microsoft, Azure OpenAI service. It's available now in IL5, IL6 environments, which are classified environments. Don't quote me on IL6. It may not be available in IL6 yet, but it's available in classified environments. And so these tools are being utilized. Scale AI has Donovan. There's some tools that are available to be used. And the more companies that understand how these tools are being used in an operational environment, meaning internal to the company, the better position those companies will be to implement these same tools for a government customer, in my humble and partly biased opinion, right?
Right.
But I truly believe that. And I think that the more tools that are becoming available and the more that we're able to solve some of these compliance problems, the better position we'll be to solve these same problems for the government.
Yeah, looking at like federal cybersecurity as a whole, what do you see are the biggest risks and opportunities that AI presents, like for our general like cybersecurity infrastructure? I mean, I think you could go both ways on it, but could you talk a bit about how AI could help or harm what we have protected us in the cyber world?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say that there's a lot of cool things that I've seen are being done on the red teaming side. So on the offensive side, there's a lot of really cool things that are being done today using AI. I won't talk too much about that. On the defensive side, the blue team side, I would say that there's still a little bit to be desired, right? In the sense of some of the vectors of attack that we see in the government space are better suited for humans that have kind of seen and been in that same environment for a while and kind of know what a vulnerability looks like for that specific environment. I think it's a little challenging for a non-deterministic system to make some of these decisions on the defensive side today. But I do think that in the future, especially with some of the knowledge graph informed LLMs and some of these, smaller models that are being developed, there's going to be a ton of opportunity for defensive cybersecurity tools to utilize AI. And regardless, I think that AI is a great tool to be used as a second opinion or even a first opinion to then kind of filter out some of this stuff and for, humans to review.
Sure. Shifting to talking about the DC region or the DC, Maryland, Virginia region, from your perspective, both from like business policy, maybe even culturally, where does DC currently stand in terms of its understanding and use of AI? Like, where are we now and where might we be going? Like, basically, how's DC approaching AI from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that there's a lot of appetite for an understanding of the AI. I don't think that I'm fully confident yet that policymakers and some folks that are less technical fully understand the full spectrum of AI today. But I'm very optimistic that they are wanting to understand on a very technical level how these systems work and how they can be utilized in environments to better the United States' position and, our allies' position as well. And I think that, overall, DC, we obviously have a very thriving tech culture. There's a lot of very bright people here. I think the one challenge that we face here, as opposed to some other tech culture environments across the country, is that folks here tend not to talk with each other as much. That's why I was super excited when the Gen AI Collective, Chappie and Catherine and Nate brought the Gen AI Collective to DC and have held a lot of these events. I think that that's going to be huge for our community and being able to share knowledge, share information, share what they're seeing on the ground. I know that there's a lot of policy people that come to those events as well. And so I think that's going to be, the next big step for us is just how can we better share information, share knowledge, and come to a consensus where we have tech people, policymakers, mission owners, kind of all meshing together to make these decisions and ultimately drive the mission outcomes that we're looking to have.
Right. And I agree that the Gen AI Collective events have been great. And obviously, I'm also a little biased there as this is all under the Gen AI Collective. But I'm curious, as a quick follow-up then, like, where do we go from here in terms of having like better events or better ways to like bridge that gap that you had mentioned that maybe policymakers have about the full spectrum of the technologies they're dealing with? Like, how does DC improve? How do we get better about having these conversations, sharing the knowledge, and then implementing better AI actions, whether like policy, business, or something else?
Yeah, I think that part of it is making some of these systems a little bit more digestible. A lot of the new technologies, new breakthroughs in the AI space are very highly technical. They're very complex. They're difficult to understand if you don't have a technical background, right? If you're not on archive.org reading papers multiple times a week, it's tough to understand some of the breakthroughs that are happening today. So I think that maybe having some folks that are able to bridge that gap a little bit better in terms of bringing some of these very complex breakthroughs as concise and clear and as easy to digest as possible for non-technical folks is going to be a major focus for a lot of folks in DC. I think that there's going to be a lot of companies that are investing a lot of time and resources into people that can do that, that can translate those technical, complex algorithms into easy to read and understand articles. I think that the other portion that would be super advantageous for DC to have would be for some of these events to take place. And granted, I know this would be terribly difficult to make happen, but maybe have some of these events take place in classified environments, in a SCIF, in a secure facility where, we can have these conversations with, amongst cleared people, right? Where there's no fear of information being leaked, but we're still able to bring the right folks together to share information and knowledge.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know that you had also recently spoken to students back at Marymount about setting themselves apart in tech. I'm curious, we've been talking a lot about the current landscape of AI tech working professionals, but for the next generation, what skills do you think are the most important for the next generation of AI and cybersecurity professionals to have.
Yeah, I hope I don't sound too much like a broken record saying that I think the biggest thing is for folks to just talk amongst each other, right? I think that, the DC space has a very underrated tech culture in terms of the number of extremely bright people that I run into on a daily basis that are solving very hard problems. And I think that the nature of the work in this area definitely leads to some of that challenge of talking and sharing information, because obviously if the person is not supposed to know what you're working on, that you shouldn't share, right?
Yeah.
But I think in general, the networking aspect, everybody in DC wants to help one another. It's a very workplace oriented environment. There's a lot of people that want to help the next generation succeed. And so I think for the next generation of engineers is really just network well, come to the events that are available to you and just talk to people, meet people. You never know where your next job may come from. Like I mentioned, the opportunity in Flow arose because of a previous role that I had and me just staying in touch over a number of years with the gentleman that I met. I think that the biggest thing is just network. Be able to set yourself apart from the pack by having tangible articles of things that you've accomplished, right? Whether it be side projects, whether it be, research efforts that you were a part of. Go above and beyond. Everyone can go to school and get a degree, which I know is maybe a spicy thing to say, but I think that unless you are able to translate what you learn in a classroom into, something tangible, it's tough for people to kind of trust that you have that knowledge. And that's why you see the huge rise over the last couple of years of these remote leak code interviews. And now you have people coming in, I forget the name of the gentleman, but who started interviewcoder.io. It's like this entirely invisible piece of software on your computer that will basically solve the leak code problem on the screen for you. So there's just this big rise of leak code interviews, and now there's going to be a big fall because people have figured out how to cheat the system. So it's like, how do you differentiate the engineers that can solve these hard problems? Well, it's, what have they solved in the past, right? So I think having those side projects, having those tangible assets that you can share with other folks is big. And again, just networking with folks to understand what needs are in a company and how you can provide value.
Yeah. Free wisdom here, honestly. I have two more questions for you. The first one is, in your experience at Inflow, working in government contracting, cybersecurity, OD, et cetera, what are the biggest misconceptions people have? Like, what are the most inaccurate things that have been said to you, either as questions or assumptions? I'm curious, what are the misconceptions that you might want to address?
Yeah, I think that one big misconception is that, folks in government are scary, or that they, are very, button up, serious people. At the end of the day, everyone's human, right? I think that we do operate in a very challenging environment, being that, at the end of the day, they want people who can come in and solve the problems that will keep them alive on the battlefield, right? That's a very challenging thing to comprehend. The incentives are very different, right? It's keeping soldiers alive on the battlefield and having an information advantage versus having some monetary outcome in a commercial company, right? So the incentive structure is very different, but I will say that that's a big misconception because, like I said, at the end of the day, everyone's human. While we're solving these hard problems, we still want to have a good time. We still want to be able to have a great team around, have a great culture, bring smart engineers and iterate rapidly. And there's a lot of Silicon Valley tech culture that's coming to DC and that are solving these government problems. And I think it's a really exciting time to be solving these problems.
Yeah, that leads into my last question. What are you most excited about for the future of AI in your work, and maybe in general, what are you the most bullish on?
Yeah, I think I'm most bullish on the fact that it levels the playing field in some ways of, you can be a 10x engineer by utilizing some of the AI tools in the right way, right? So I'm very bullish on that part of being able to kind of replicate yourself and operate, a leaner team and solve these problems without kind of the traditional bureaucracy that you see a lot of in the government space. So I'm very bullish on that. And I'm also very bullish on the fact that there will be a lot of engineers that are able to translate some of these harder to understand requirements or challenges that you maybe that are in a problem space that you're less familiar with into more actionable steps, like engineering steps, right? I think that that's going to be another area on both on the government side, developing requirements, and also on the industry side, kind of consuming those requirements and translating them into technical documentation or, product roadmap. So I think that both of those things I'm very bullish on.
Yeah, I hope those things happen sooner rather than later because they sound great. This was great. Thanks, Ryan. I think that we covered a good amount of ground and really appreciate you taking the time. And I think that this will just be helpful for anybody who knows just less than you on this topic, which I assume is a lot of us. So thank you for your time. Again, this was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Sam, for the opportunity. And, I'm very excited for the future and would love to keep coming to the events and meeting more people.
Yes, please do. That's a wrap for this episode of DC Decoded. I want to thank Ryan again for his time. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe to DC Decoded on your favorite podcast platform, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. And if you found this discussion valuable, we'd love it if you left a rating or review. It helps others discover the show. For more on the DC chapter of the Gen AI Collective, upcoming events, and ways to get involved via collaborations or sponsorships, check out the links in the show description. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in 2 Wednesdays for the next episode.